guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be this really easy tutorial for beginners using all affordable and drugstore products. I recently did a video talking about my starter kit for beginners, the affordable version. So it was using all affordable products and drugstore products. So if you guys haven't checked out that video, I will have it linked down below in the description box, so you guys can definitely check out that video. If you guys have any questions, every single product that I did mention in that video I did use today for this tutorial. So if you guys are interested in learning how to recreate this super easy beginner friendly makeup tutorial, then continue watching. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to use from our beginners drugstore edition starter kit is our foundation primer. I'm going to use the Wet n Wild Cover All primer. So I just take about a pea-sized amount and I apply that all over my face. The next step would be to prime your eyes. You can use an eyeshadow primer if you want, but if you don't have an eyeshadow primer, you can also use your concealer and it will double up as an eyeshadow primer. So I'm using the Maybelline Better Skin Concealer and I'm in the shade medium. The reason why I'm in the shade medium is because it's more of a brightening color. Typically I'm always medium tan or just tan, but I decided to go with medium because it's a little lighter, so that way underneath my eyes it really brightens. So all I do is I just take a few little dabs of the concealer and put it on my eyes. And then I'll just go ahead and use my fingers to rub that in. And then I'm just going to take a matte eyeshadow that's a little bit brighter than my skin color just to set that concealer so that way it doesn't budge. And I'm just going to take that on an e.l.f. blending brush. So I literally just take this eyeshadow and just apply it all over, and that sets the concealer so that way it doesn't budge. And this also helps so that way your eyeshadow applies a lot more smoothly. So the next step we want to do after we have our eyes primed is we want to go ahead and fill in our eyebrows. I'm going to use the e.l.f. eyebrow pencil in the shade Natural Brown, and I like it because it has a little spoolie, so that way I can comb through my eyebrows, make sure that they're not all wild looking, and I can also blend out the pencil. So I'll use the spoolie side first, and I just brush upwards and then I just brush it towards the tail. And then I'll take the pencil and I'm going to leave the spoolie side uncapped so that way I can blend it throughout. So what I always do to fill in my eyebrows is I just outline my eyebrows basically. And I do have thicker eyebrows, so this step for me doesn't take that much time. But I always recommend outlining the shape that you want first, and then you can fill it in. And then I always go where the arch is, and I fill in the outer part of the top of my eyebrow before I fill in the front. And after I created the tail, then I'm just going to start filling in the sparse areas. And then I'm going to go ahead and I like to leave this part a little bit more natural. So what I do is I just make hair-like strokes in the beginning of my eyebrows. And I kind of follow the direction in which my eyebrows are growing. And then I'll take my spoolie and I just blend everything together. So that way there's no harshness and it looks more natural. And less is always more. So this is one eyebrow filled in and this is my eyebrow not filled in. I did kind of fill it in a little bit thicker, but it's okay. And one of the biggest tips when filling in your eyebrows is always remembering that your eyebrows are sisters, not twins. So it's okay if they don't look identical, as long as they look similar. That's all that really matters. So then what I'm going to do, this step is totally optional. I'm going to use some of my Wet n Wild Mega Clear Brow and Lash Mascara. And I just use this to set my eyebrows. And this is going to make sure that my eyebrows don't go moving throughout the day. And I like using a clear brow gel so that way it looks more natural. So next I'm gonna go in to my Colourpop eyeshadows. You could use any of the other palettes that I did mention in my beginner's starter kit, but I decided to go with my little customized Colourpop quad. So these are some basic colors that I think that every person needs when starting off with eyeshadow. That way you don't have anything that's too complex, too overwhelming. Neutrals is always the way to go. You can do more cool tones, you can do warm tones, whatever you prefer. So when it comes to brushes, you don't need 50 million brushes to make a finished look, especially something that's really simple. I would say at max you would probably need 5 brushes, and you can definitely find some brushes for cheap. Some of my favorite inexpensive brushes are Morphe. Another inexpensive brush brand is e.l.f. There's also Wet n Wild. Crown Brushes is also a really good one too, that a lot of people don't really talk about, but it is an awesome brand. It's very affordable. So I have 5 brushes here, and these are the basic 5 brushes that I think I need for an everyday look. 2 of them aren't the ones that I typically use, but for starters, I think these 5 are very key to any look. So the first brush I have here is the Morphe M553. So this is just a fluffy brush, and mine is a larger one since I do have larger eyes. If you have smaller eyes, then you can use something like the Wet n Wild fluffy crease brush, which if you see them side by side, it's a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna start off with the shade Wakeup from Morphe. So this is a transition shade. It's a shade that I think every single person needs. I'm not saying this color in particular, but just a transition shade. It is very, very important, especially when blending out eyeshadows, because this is kind of like that light wash of warmth that kind of helps colors transition into one another, so that way there's no harsh lines. And it's very important to apply it with a fluffy brush, because that way you diffuse the color and it's not really harsh and stark on your eyes. So with transition shades, the typical rule of thumb is you want to use 1 to 2 shades darker than your skin tone. So I'm just going to take that on my fluffy brush, and what I'm going to do is put that in the crease, and I'm going to go in circular motions and windshield wiper motion. And when I go in circular motions, that creates more of that diffused look. The windshield wiper just puts the color where it belongs. And another key thing when blending out eyeshadows is you want to make sure that you're holding the brush correctly. So as you see here, I'm holding it kind of like in the middle but closer towards the bottom, and then I use very, very light pressure, and my brush is also straight towards my eye, not upwards or downwards. If you do it upwards, then you're going to apply it into your eyebrow. If you put it downward, it's going to go into your lid. But if you hold it straight forward, then you're applying it exactly where you want it. So I'm using light pressure just since I want this to be a nice wash and I don't want it to be too harsh. The closer towards the bottom of the brush that you hold it, the less pressure you're applying on your eye. So the next brush is a tapered blending brush. So this was a fluffy blending brush. This is a tapered blending brush. So this is the Morphe M433. This one is one of my favorites, similar to the MAC 217. Just to show you guys side-by-side comparison, as you see, the M443, which is the white-haired one, that's a little bit stained, it's smaller and a lot more dense. So this is gonna pack on the color, but at the same time, since it is tapered, it's gonna blend out the color. The fluffy one diffuses, this one places and blends. I'm gonna take this color Popular Demand. This is gonna be a good definition color. This color isn't too dark that it's gonna look intimidating or be hard to blend out, but it's also not too light that you won't be able to notice. It definitely will add some nice definition to your eyes. You don't have to use this particular shade. This is more of a red-brown shade. It's what I prefer to use for an everyday look. So what I'm gonna do is take that on my Morphe M443 and I apply it on the flat side of the brush. So I don't apply it on the tip. I apply it on the flat side, which I refer to as the belly. So here's the side, this is the flat side. And always make sure that before you put on any eyeshadow, you always tap off the excess. That way you don't get fallout. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take that, and I like using the flat side because then I can really apply that on my outer V. So I go from my outer corner into my lash line, and then from my outer corner into my crease, and that's the outer V. And I do that with the belly of the brush. That way it's really, really quick and easy. I also use this technique in my go-to makeup tutorial, which I will link that down below as well. So I built up the color. That's another thing with eyeshadow, is you always have to remember you can build up the intensity of the color. So if it doesn't look the way that you want it right away, build it up slowly. Always start off with a little bit of product and then build your way up into the intensity that you want. If you start off with too much, and that's when it can look crazy, and that's why people have a hard time with black. Then what I'm gonna do is whatever color is left over, I'm just gonna bring that into my crease. The way to find your crease is you press into your eye, or wherever the fold is, that's where your crease is. Now if you have hooded eyes, what I like to do is apply it above where my crease is, and that'll make your eyes look a lot bigger and you'll have more lid space. The next brush that I think is super important is a flat shader brush. I personally like flat concealer brushes, so these are the flat synthetic ones. They really pack on the color. This is the Morphe M224. It's technically for concealer, but you can use this as an eyeshadow brush, and I absolutely love it. So I'm gonna take the color Just in Time from Colourpop. This is just a shimmery gold color. I'm gonna take some of that on my flat concealer brush, always tap off the excess, and then all I'm gonna do is just start applying it onto my lid. And I want to start in the inner part of my lid. So as you see, I go where my crease is and then swipe down. Then what I do to blend in the color is I'll bring it towards the center or the inner part of my eye. So that's what it looks like unblended. I'm going to do the same thing on the other eye. So then I'm going to go back in with the M433 brush, and this is the one that we used earlier for the definition color. And I'm going to use it all the way towards the bottom and use very light pressure and just go in between where those two colors meet, and that way I blend it out. And then I'll also just run it in the crease so that way I blend out that harsh line. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my brow bone. I'm going to go into the shade Locked and Loaded, and this is also from Colourpop. And I'm just going to take that on an e.l.f. blending brush. It's what it's called. This is the brush that we used earlier to apply this color all over the lid to set the concealer. So I'm going to use some of that just to highlight my brow bone. I like using a matte shade because I have such big eyes, so I like this because it doesn't add too much attention. If you have smaller eyes, then you want something more shimmery. And then I always put it on the center of my brow where my arch is, and I like using a fluffier brush because then I can blend in the transition shade with the brow bone shade. And then I'm going to go back in one more time with the M533 brush and just go around all the edges and make sure there's no harsh lines. And this is a key step to getting perfect eyeshadow. So next, since we already have our foundation primer on from earlier, I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of my face. So what I'm going to do, and this step is optional, is I'm going to color correct. So color correction, it can be very intimidating, but there's a whole bunch of charts on it. Basically, orange or peach cancels out dark circles or blue tones in the face. Yellow cancels out purple, so you can also use that if you're a more fair person. Correct your under eye circles. Green cancels out redness. But there's a whole bunch of different ones, just depending on your skin tone. Me personally, since I am darker, I like using a dark orange, and this is from Hard Candy. So this is their color corrector. And I'm just gonna take some of that. And then I also always color correct around my mouth, because in this area here, since I am deeper in skin tone, I have a lot of darkness in here. So if I don't do this step, then when I put on my foundation, it looks really gray and ashy, which is basically what happens if you don't color correct. So what I'm going to use to blend out my corrector is my Real Technique sponge. I got this from Walmart. It's $5. I absolutely love this. It makes the foundation look really nice, and any cream products that you put on, it blends it out super easily. So I just take it, I already wet it, I squeezed out all the excess. You want to make sure that you use this sponge wet. If you use it dry, it's not going to have the same effect. So I just take it, dab it underneath my eyes. And just like that, the corrector is blended on this side. So you can see the difference. So the next step is I like to use concealer next. I'm going to use my Better Skin Concealer from Maybelline in the shade Medium. And I just take that, and I like doing a little triangle because that helps to brighten up all underneath the eye. If you only do it underneath the eyes, then it won't brighten up this area and it kind of looks uneven. And then I always make sure to brighten up inside the inner corner because that's where the most darkness is. So if you put concealer in that part, then it'll really brighten up the eyes. And you can also use the concealer to clean up the edges of the eyeshadow natural if you go a little bit outside of the lines. And I always also put it around my nose because I have a lot of redness there. So then I'll use that same sponge, same side that I had the corrector on, just dab that onto my skin. And I like it because it has that nice tip, so I can really get in the inner corner. So next for foundation, I'm going to use my L'Oreal Pro Matte Infallible Foundation, and this is in the shade 108 Caramel Beige. So I'll just take that on my fingers and I just dot it on all over my skin, and then I'll take the sponge and just start dabbing it into my skin. I'm just gonna keep blending this and then I'll be right back. Alrighty, so my camera was overheated, so I just had to finish blending out my foundation. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use some of my Cody airspun, and this is the translucent extra coverage loose powder. And I like doing this step, so I just take some of that from my sifter, and I'm using a crown brush, and I'm just gonna go ahead and blend that all over my face. And this just sets in my foundation, so that way it doesn't budge. Next, what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna go ahead and contour. And I always like to make sure that I set all of my cream products before I use any powders, because if you use powders on top of cream, sometimes it can get really muddy or it can be hard to blend. Just like the same reason why we had to set our concealer is the same reason why we had to set our foundation. For today, I'm going to go ahead and use my Wet n Wild Caramel Toffee Contouring Palette, and I'm going to use my e.l.f. bronzing brush. And this is like $2 at Target. And I'm just going to use some of that. I personally like using powder contour because it looks more natural, and I just contour the areas that I feel need it. So I want to define my cheekbones, so I just go from the top of my ear all the way like down to right where the cheekbone is. And I always like to go above where I want the contour to go, because since this is a fluffier brush, it's going to blend out anyway. So if you go where you want it, then it's going to go underneath as well. I also like to contour around my forehead, mostly in my hairline, and sometimes I'll contour my jawline. And I connect that all the time to the contour for my cheekbones. So next what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and take my e.l.f. blush palette, and this is in the dark. So this has 4 different shades. I like these palettes because depending on the lip color, you have different blushes, and these are really, really good quality. So what I'm going to go ahead and use is this darker mauve color, and I'm going to use that on a crown angled brush. You can smile to find the apples of your cheeks, and use this when I apply it at the apples of your cheeks and kind of bring it up towards the hairline near the ears, kind of where you had the contour. So this is going right above the contour. This blends into the contour so that way it looks nice and natural. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and highlight my cheekbones, and I'm going to use the shade Boozy Brunch, and this is from Wet n Wild. And I'm going to use this highlighting brush from my Morphe Copper Dream set, and I'm just going to take a little bit of that on the brush and just apply it right on my cheekbones. And since I have more pores here, I apply it like where my eyebrow is, all the way to the middle part of my iris. And then I like this brush because since it is also fluffy, I can blend that into the blush, and that way it's not just like a streak of light. And I like this highlight because it has a nice gold undertone to it. It really brings out the warmth in my skin. And I also highlight the tip of my nose, my cupid's bow, right above the eyebrows, and this just adds some lip to the eyebrows, and then also to the chin, whatever's left over. And then what I do to make sure everything blended in is I take that blush brush with no additional product, and I just go over everything, make sure it's nice and blended. I know I talked about earlier how you need 5 brushes, and I didn't use one of them yet, and it was because it was for my inner corner highlight. So I'm using that same highlighter from earlier and using this crown brush pencil brush. This is also from that set, and I'm just gonna go ahead and highlight my inner corners, and this makes the eyeshadow look more complete and it really makes it pop. So you can use your highlighter, or you can use a highlighting eyeshadow, or if you use a shimmery highlight for your eyebrows, you can use that in the inner corner too. So all I do is I just take that in circular motion in the inner corner on the pencil brush. That's it. It just adds some brightness into the eyes and makes your eyes look more awake. At this point, what I like to do is just take some setting spray. I'm going to use my e.l.f. setting spray and just set everything that we've done so far. So then I'm going to use my Jordana Best Lash Extreme Mascara, which is one of my favorites. And I'm just going to apply that onto my lashes. Now, you could just do mascara and not do any falsies, but I'm going to show you guys how to do falsies. So before you do lashes, you always want to make sure you have mascara on because it's going to serve as a base for your lashes and it makes them blend in. And since the lashes are already kind of clumped up together, it makes it easier to apply the lashes. So that way you're not applying the lashes in between or getting your lashes stuck in the glue or anything like that. So since I'm not do only mascara, I'm just applying a thin coat. If I wanted to just rock this without lashes, then I would put on more than one coat or really build up that coat. And what I really want to focus on is my bottom lashes since I'm not putting on falsies there. So for lashes, what you need for those is a good pair of tweezers, and they even have lash tweezers. I'm going to use mine from Anastasia. These are the tweezers that I use on a day-to-day basis. You can use any tweezers at all. And then I'm going to use some of the Kiss True Volume lashes, and these are in the style Ritzy. So they're a nice flared out natural lash. I'll show you guys there. So they are shorter in the inside and longer on the outside, just makes it look more cat-like. So what I do is I take my lashes or my tweezers and put them in the middle of my eyelashes, just like that. And then I'm going to use the Kiss Lash Strip Adhesive. I like the brush-on ones because it makes it easier to apply the lashes, and I also feel like it gets tacky quicker. So I just apply a thin strip of that onto the lashes, and I always apply a little extra on the inner and outer corners so that way they don't budge or go anywhere. And then I just kind of shake them for like 15 to 20 seconds until they get tacky. And you know it gets tacky because when you go to touch it, then your fingers kind of get stuck a little bit. So usually waiting 20 seconds max is a good time, because that way they're still wet but they're not super wet. They're that nice tacky that lets you move them around. So once I've waited the 20 seconds, then what I do is I always apply in the middle, and that's why I hold them from the middle and get it as close to the lash line as possible. And then what I'll do is take the tweezers, grab the outer corner and stick that onto the outer corner, and then do the same thing to the inner corner. And I recommend using tweezers because you can really get close. And then what I do is I just close my eyes and push the lashes onto the eyelash or the lash line. And look at the difference between lashes and no lashes. So this is a great way to do like an easy glam. If you want it more everyday, you'll do no lashes. If you want more glam, then put lashes on. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other eye. That's it for the eyes. You can do eyeliner on the lower lash line if you want to. I'm going to opt out of it for today. And then I'm going to move on to the lips. So for the lips, I'm going to use a brown lip liner. This is something that I find to be very essential, especially when you're using a nude lip, because this just helps to define the lips and really make sure that your new lipstick doesn't wash you out. So you want something that's just a few shades darker, probably I'd say like 2 to 3 shades darker than your skin color. This is Jordana Easy Liner Retractable Pencil in Coco Loco, which is one of my favorites. And I just literally outline my lips. And since I don't have a cupid's bow, I have to kind of draw one. I always press my lips together to blend it all out. And then I'm just going to use Wet n Wild Rebel Rose. This is just a mauve pink. And I always apply it right on top of the lip liner so that way it blends out. And then that's basically it. This is the finished look. So this is my really easy glam for beginners. I hope you guys did enjoy, and make sure that you guys do check out my beginner starter kit. Every single product that I use today is in that video, so make sure you guys do check that out. And if you guys have any requests, please don't hesitate to leave them down below in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys would love to see. And as always, if you recreate this look, make sure you do tag me in my social medias, and I will see you guys in the next one. Until then,